Howdy my totally tubular gamers, happy new year, new January, new month of edgy video games, and I thought we'd start it off with something a little different. We're going to be looking at a very edgy series of games, the South Park video games.
Now, I'm sure everyone watching this video knows what South Park is, the hilarious Comedy Central sitcom that's been running for as long as I've been alive. They've been known for frequently pushing buttons and just really making statements on current events and making fun of Canadians pretty frequently. Now, with an IP as big as South Park, there's obviously been some video games. I mean, really every single popular cartoon sitcom has had some video games based off of it, and so it's only natural that South Park would as well. Now, over the years, there's been a fair amount of South Park games. There's officially been 7 released for consoles. And most of the games are pretty infamous for, well, just not being all that great. And the creators of South Park have shit on them many times. But I have played all of them, and I thought, hey, let's rank them. I thought it'd be a fun little ranking if we rank all the South Park games. And these games, really, when it comes to quality, are just really varying and all over the place. So we're going to be ranking them based off of comedy, how well they follow the show, how well they look like the show, the gameplay as a whole, you know, that kind of stuff. How do these games actually stack up against each other? Are they truly as bad as some people say, or are there some hidden gems in here? Well, you know what, let's find out, and let's just do a ranking of the South Park games. And before we begin, as usual, if you could like, share, sub, all that great stuff, that'd be amazing. So what is truly the worst of the South Park games? Yeah, well, the worst of the South Park games has gotta be Chef's Love Shack, released in '99 for the 64, Dreamcast, PlayStation, and Windows. Chef's Love Shack really is a minigame collection, ultimately, with some trivia in it as well, and it's not good at all. While the game is classified as a party game, I would not call this a Mario Party clone or a You Don't Know Jack clone, because that's doing a major disservice to both of those series, as this game is it's just an abomination, really. All of the minigames in this game are just terrible. There's not a single good minigame here at all. All of these minigames are ridiculously basic and don't control very well, and this game is just full of abundant load times. Like, load times are everywhere in this game, and it gets really annoying really quickly, and it kills the pace that this game could have had. So, pretty much the main gimmick of the game, the minigames are bad. What about the trivia? Well, the trivia is not good either. It's clear that the You Don't Know Jack people, whoever helped with this, yeah, no, they just clearly weren't trying here, as this isn't good. The game's not funny. The game's barely even reminiscent of South Park, it feels like. It just feels like it just took the South Park IP and made their own game with it rather than something related to South Park. And overall, even with friends, again, this is just not a fun experience. This is one of the worst party games I've ever seen, and that's really saying something. I played Crash Boom Bang. Do not recommend this game. The next game on our list is South Park TENORMANS Revenge, which was released by Microsoft only on the 360 via Xbox Live Arcade. The story of the game sees Tenorman sneaking into Cartman's house to take revenge and steals his Xbox 360 hard drive. Now, the South Park boys don't want their 360 hard drive stolen because, you know, they got all their saved games. Tenorman escapes into a portal that goes into ? And the boys follow him, and it's all about them stopping him. Well, I mean, the plot's better than no plot, I can say that. I don't really have all that much to comment on, though, besides that. It's got the occasional funny moment. This game is funnier than Chef's Love Shack, but not by much. I can say at the very least it looks like South Park, so that's a plus. But when it comes to the gameplay, this game's kind of an abomination also. The game is a 2D platformer that was designed to be played with 4 players. Good luck finding 3 other people to play with you in 2021, and because of that, this is a pretty awful experience as a whole. The controls are pretty awful, as they're really slippery, they're imprecise, and the game just feels quite slow most of the time. The characters do have special abilities, which is cool, but it feels really underutilized, and then if you're playing single player, there's just a bunch of areas you cannot access. You can barely even get through this game if you're playing single player, because a lot of the areas require certain characters and their special abilities, which is just really lame level design. The camera is very poor in this game, as well, as it frequently just does not give you enough. It doesn't give you enough of a view, which is really annoying, and the game as a whole is actually just quite annoying. Since you're playing alone, you can't even try to collect half the stuff in this game, and also since you're playing alone, the game's probably going to be decently difficult, and good luck getting through the whole game without any frustration because the checkpoints are super far apart. You'll end up replaying areas over and over, and sure, some of the combat sequences are fine enough. You get little weapons, you can jump on some enemies, and there's even the occasional boss fight, but this game feels like a very average to just bad platformer. Maybe I played in completely the wrong experience by trying to go with this alone, but my experience with it alone was just not enjoyable at all, and I just was like, I really wanted to put this game down pretty fast. So if anybody has any good memories of them playing it in 4-player co-op, they can tell me in the comments, but otherwise this is a game you should absolutely steer clear of, and it's a pretty mediocre 2D platformer. Now the next game on our list is South Park Rally, released in '99 for the Dreamcast, PlayStation, N64, and the Windows. And I actually played this game quite a bit as a kid, and I can say that it is a racing game that exists, and that's about it. The game doesn't do anything offensively terrible, but it doesn't exactly do anything very well either. Maybe it's just my nostalgia talking, but this is a very middle-of-the-road kart racer that really just is very mediocre for the most part. The game doesn't really have any story, but at the very least it looks like South Park for the N64 and that era of gaming. Like, the models are pretty alright, the voice acting is pretty good, all the original voice actors are here, the game tries to make lots of little references to the show, and you know, it does have a number of references to the show, and these are funny. A lot of these references become annoying quickly, especially the character quotes that just get reused over and over. The game does have a decent roster, at least. Like, the character selection is pretty good. It has really every South Park character that was around at the time. But then you get to the actual gameplay where it becomes a very mediocre standard affair of a kart racer where you just kind of go around these really bland, generic tracks, just going over checkpoints because these maps just really aren't competently designed. None of the tracks feel like they were really designed with any care. There's not many tracks to begin with, but it feels like they created a map and then tried to create a race around it with like checkpoints, and it's pretty obvious that's what they tried to do, since there are a lot of events in this game that are not races. Things like a more Mario Kart battle style mode, or where you're trying to collect stuff before the other players, or like stay away from the other players when you have an item, that kind of basic stuff. None of the events are very good in this game. The racing itself isn't all that great. The controls are pretty questionable. They're pretty faulty. They're generally unresponsive. The karts love to get stuck on stuff. The tracks do nothing interesting. The racing overall is very basic. It's simple. It's boring. The items don't really add anything. Sure, I had a tiny bit of fun with multiplayer back in the day, but I cannot recommend this game. It is not a good racing game nowadays. It wasn't really even very good then. And yeah, it's just an overall pretty mediocre experience. I mean, I had more fun with it than the last two games, but that's not really saying much. The next game on our list is finally a good game, and that is South Park Let's Go Tower Defense Play, released by Microsoft on the 360. This was the first South Park game in a decade and was actually created with the creators, and well, they tried with this one, and you know what, this is actually a pretty fun little tower defense game. It sees the boys of South Park fighting Professor Chaos. The game looks like South Park. It's actually decently funny. It has all the voice actors and all that stuff, and when it comes to feeling like a South Park game, this actually does feel like it could be a South Park game, and it does feel like the creators of South Park were even slightly involved in this, which is definitely a huge step above the last couple games. When it comes to the gameplay, I will say that the gameplay is a pretty standard tower defense game. If you've really played any tower defense game, like even ones on mobile like Clash of Clans, you're going to feel pretty familiar with this one, as it plays pretty similarly, and it doesn't really do anything different for the genre or tower defense games in general. Really, your goal for each level is to just take out all the enemies by strategically placing towers, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just a defense game, and while it doesn't do anything amazing, it doesn't do anything bad really either. It is a very middle of the road, just kind of average tower defense experience, and it's really South Park that saves this game from being just very average, and the South Park license carries it quite a bit. The game even did have multiplayer when it released, but I didn't play this. I don't really have all that much to say about this game, as it is just a fun little tower defense game. It honestly could be on a mobile device and I would believe it, and I didn't play this game all that much, especially back in the day, but it's not bad, that's for sure. The next game on our list is just titled South Park. It was released on the 64, PlayStation, and the Windows. I played the N64 version, that's what I've been playing all these years, and this was actually the first South Park game ever made. The game is a first-person shooter that runs on the Turok engine and was even made by the people who made Turok: Acclaim, and the game was pretty infamous for being a pretty awful first-person shooter. However, the N64 version is actually the best version of the game and is pretty decent as a whole. This, again, might be nostalgia talking, but I actually think that the South Park game on N64 is a fun little time. Sure, it's not amazing and it does have some problems, but it's not a total train wreck. It's not one of the worst shooters ever made, like some have called this game. The controls absolutely take some time getting used to, like any of those Turok-styled games, and it definitely is better suited to an emulator than an actual N64 controller, but at least the frame rate's fine, the game looks like South Park, and the voice acting is, well, it's okay. There's a couple little episodes that you play through the game, and each one has its own little story, and it's decently different from the last. My favorite being the one with the turkeys. That's what I play every Thanksgiving. And this is a competent enough first-person shooter. All the weapons are really unique and different because it's South Park. Like, you're peeing on snowballs, you're using chickens, you're throwing Terrence and Phillip dolls. The weapons are unique enough. The enemy variety is decent enough. It's all really weird. Like, it's just really odd. The game does have some charm, and it is challenging, and there are some boss fights in this game that are beyond challenging and are mostly just frustrating, and yeah, these bosses are pretty awful, but I still had a fun enough time playing the game. There is a decent little multiplayer that's trying to be like GoldenEye, that's pretty funny too. I'd say the biggest issue with the game is definitely the fog and level design. The game does have the infamous Turok fog, only it is much, much worse in this game than it was in Turok, and because of that, the levels are very confusing. You don't know where to go half the time because you just can't see, and everything looks the same when you finally run up to it. You gotta be really close to see anything. A lot of the enemies you just hear forever and ever because you can't see them until they get like right in your face, like the turkeys. The balancing was also kind of whack, especially when it came to the ammo, but I've just been talking about the N64 version this whole time. I know the PlayStation and Windows version are just atrocious. They're just horrible. If you're going to touch this game, for whatever reason, out of maybe curiosity, only play the N64 version. Do not, I repeat, do not touch the other versions. They are awful, and I'm sure most people will agree with that. N64, though, had a fun little time with this one, and I still have fun with it even nowadays, but yeah, it's probably mostly nostalgia, but it's not terrible, it's not amazing, but it is fine. Now, I believe the second best South Park game is actually the latest South Park game, at least for consoles, and that is South Park: The Fractured But Whole. The game is the sequel to The Stick of Truth. It was not developed by Obsidian, but rather Ubisoft SF. However, the game is still written by Matt and Trey. The game drops the D&D approach that The Stick of Truth had and goes for a superhero approach with its story, and it's all about Cartman trying to create basically their own MCU and make tons of money, and it's just about the kids playing, and well, some crazy shit goes down, and I'll just leave it at that. The plot of the game is very excellent, as it is clearly written by the South Park creators. It's just as good as The Stick of Truth. It's got the same humor of South Park. It looks like South Park. It really looks like South Park, and it's a really enjoyable watch in addition to playing the game, but just watching it in itself, it's like an episode of South Park, maybe like a movie of South Park. It's a really funny game, I can say that, but I will say that it does rely a bit too much on toilet humor, especially compared to even the last game, and there's a lot more. I mean, just look at the title of the game and you already know. The game still is a 2.5D role-playing game where you create your own character, you choose your class, and you just kind of explore South Park around, and then also get into battles. A good portion of the game really is exploring South Park, just finding new stuff, adding people on Coonstagram, uncovering secrets, using your fart powers to uncover different things in the world, sometimes finding better equipment, or just progressing the game in general, and solving the occasional puzzle. When it comes to the combat, it is pretty similar to The Stick of Truth, but there are a few key differences here. It is still a turn-based role-playing game, so your party goes, the enemy party goes, then you go, etc. The moves still have you doing these kind of quick-time events similar to like Paper Mario. However, the biggest change is the fact that you're now on a grid. The original game, it was just a very straight role-playing game, but now you are on a grid. It does use grid-based combat where you have to move across tiles, and things can get in the way preventing you from moving across the tile, like the lava, the red Legos. And this leads to a lot more variety, especially when it comes to the classes, as some enemies might require ranged attacks, some enemies you might want to get close and personal, and obviously the grid plays a big factor in this. There's status effects, there's weaknesses, there's items, there's even summons in this. It's actually a pretty competent RPG, all things considered. Fractured But Whole is a pretty enjoyable time. It does have a decent amount of challenge to it, and if you like The Stick of Truth, there's no reason to not play this one. But in my opinion, it's not number one. And it's pretty obvious, but I think the best South Park game is South Park The Stick of Truth, released on pretty much everything. Developed by Obsidian, this was a huge revelation for South Park and is an excellent RPG in pretty much every aspect. I remember when this game came out, it had a huge amount of hype behind it, and in my opinion, it absolutely delivered to deliver one of my favorite RPGs of all time. The game lets you create your new character, known as the New Kid, who just came to South Park with a shady past, and well, he teams up with all the kids to play some Dungeons and Dragons. The story was completely written by Matt and Trey, and it shows because this game is just absolutely hilarious. One of the funniest games ever made. In my opinion, much funnier than The Fractured Butthole. The comedy is a lot edgier, it's a lot more profound, and this game just gets pretty wild. Like, it's really edgy. There was a lot of cutscenes in certain versions of this game, and the game looks like South Park, it feels like South Park, you love to explore South Park, all the voice acting is super on point. It is the definitive South Park experience, like it's not even close. The game being an RPG, there's obviously two aspects to it. There's the exploring around kind of mechanics, and then there's the actual battles. When you're exploring around South Park, it is pretty awesome. It's a very faithful recreation of the South Park town, and it's really fun to explore around. There's tons of characters to interact to. You can add them on Facebook and be friends with them. There's side quests, there's fart powers to explore the world with, there's hidden items, there's collectibles, and really there's just almost an infinite, it seems, number of references to the South Park show, which they're all just hilarious. This was one of the few games where I actually wanted to do every side objective, try to collect as much as I can, and just do as much as I can in this game because I just was having such a fun time with it. It was so entertaining. And then there are your battles, which are your very standard JRPG turn-based affairs, where it plays like a really standard JRPG, where it's your turn, enemy's turn, that kind of thing. And when you do attacks in the game, there's actually like prompts and QuickTime events, very similar to Paper Mario. Fractured Butthole did this as well, but I think Stick of Truth, it does it better. I don't think the combat needed that grid system from Fractured. I think it's just better like this. It's simple to understand. It has some somewhat deep mechanics. There's a bunch of different RPG mechanics that are in there, like the elements, like weaknesses. There's a few different classes. They all have unique moves. They all feel pretty differently, which is actually quite cool and adds to some replayability. I've even played through the game more than once because I had such a nice time with it. The Stick of Truth is ultimately a very unforgettable experience. It's an experience I'll hold dear to my heart. It means a lot to me. This game is not only one of my favorite role-playing games of all time, one of the best licensed games of all time, but just one of my favorite games ever. Like, it really is, and ultimately, that was why I even created this list to begin with, was just to talk more about Stick of Truth. Fractured is good too. Fractured is a very solid game, but Stick of Truth really is just the best and is one of Obsidian's best. And so that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tell me what your favorite South Park game is. It's probably Stick of Truth. And yeah, you know what to do. Like, share, sub, all that good stuff. Have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year's. Have a good 4th of July. Have a good Easter. Have a good Hanukkah. Have a good Chinese New Year. Have a good whatever the hell you celebrate. See ya.